Baby saw a bear cub trapped in a bookstore. Reading Nook, what Baby did next was heartwarming. The afternoon sun pushed through the tall windows of the old bookstore, creating golden patches on the worn wooden floor. Ethan Marshall pushed the stroller slowly through the narrow aisles, careful not to bump against the towering shelves that seemed to lean in like old friends sharing secrets. His daughter Lily, just 18 months old, sat quietly in her stroller, her small hands reaching out occasionally toward the colorful book spines that lined their path. The bookstore had that particular smell that only old bookstores have. A mixture of aged paper, dust, and something else, something almost magical that made you want to whisper even when no one else was around. Ethan had discovered this place by accident 3 weeks ago, when a sudden rainstorm had forced him to seek shelter during one of their daily walks. Now it had become their favorite afternoon destination, a peaceful escape from the busy world outside where time seemed to move differently, more slowly, more gently. The bookstore was nearly empty at this hour, which was exactly how Ethan preferred it. The owner, an older gentleman he had seen a few times but never properly met, was somewhere in the back, probably sorting through new arrivals or lost in one of his own books. Lily made a soft cooing sound, her signal that she wanted to get out and explore. Ethan smiled and lifted her from the stroller, setting her down on her unsteady feet. She immediately toddled toward the children's section, a cozy corner at the back of the store where someone had created a perfect reading nook with soft cushions, a small wooden table and walls painted with whimsical forest scenes. The light there was softer, filtered through a green curtain that gave everything a dreamy, underwater quality. Lily loved this spot, often sitting among the cushions and babbling to herself as she turned the thick cardboard pages of picture books, even though she couldn't read yet. But today, something was different. Lily stopped at the entrance to the reading nook, her tiny body suddenly very still. She tilted her head to one side, the way she did when she heard music or an interesting sound. Then she made a noise Ethan had never heard her make before, a soft, questioning "oh" that seemed to come from deep in her chest. He moved closer, curious about what had captured her attention so completely. As he approached, he heard it too, a sound so quiet he might have missed it if the bookstore hadn't been so silent. It was breathing, slow and rhythmic, coming from behind the largest pile of cushions in the corner. Ethan's first instinct was protective, to grab Lily and step back. But something about the sound wasn't threatening. It was almost musical, like wind through leaves, and Lily seemed drawn to it rather than frightened. She took another step forward, her chubby hands extended in front of her for balance, and that's when Ethan saw it. Tucked into the farthest corner of the reading nook, partially hidden by a fallen stack of picture books, was a small bear cub. Not a teddy bear, not a toy, but an actual living, breathing bear cub with soft brown fur that caught the filtered green light in a way that made it seem almost golden. The cub couldn't have been more than a few months old, about the size of a medium dog, and it was curled into itself, its dark eyes watching Lily with an expression that seemed impossibly gentle, almost sad. Ethan's heart jumped into his throat. His mind raced through a dozen thoughts at once. How did a bear cub get into a bookstore in the middle of the city? Was it dangerous? Should he grab Lily and run? Call animal control? But even as these thoughts tumbled through his head, he found himself frozen, watching as his daughter continued her slow approach toward the cub. The cub didn't move, didn't growl, didn't show any signs of aggression. Instead, it seemed to shrink deeper into the corner, as if it was the one who was afraid. Lily reached the edge of the cushion pile and stopped, looking back at her father with those big blue eyes that always seemed to understand more than they should. She pointed at the cub and said one of her few clear words, "Baby?" Then looked back at the cub with such tenderness that Ethan felt his chest tighten. The cub made a soft whimpering sound, barely audible, and Lily responded by sitting down cross-legged on the cushions, just a few feet away from it. She didn't try to touch it, didn't move any closer, just sat there with her hands in her lap, looking at the cub with the patient curiosity that only very young children possess. Ethan found himself moving forward slowly, his protective instincts warring with a strange sense that this moment was important, that interrupting it would be wrong somehow. He knelt beside Lily, ready to pull her away if necessary, but the cub just watched them both with those dark, intelligent eyes. Up close, Ethan could see that the cub looked exhausted, its breathing shallow and quick, despite the calm it was trying to project. There were no visible injuries, but something about the way it held itself suggested it had been there for a while, maybe even overnight. The reading nook, with its high walls of cushions and hidden corner, would have been the perfect place for a frightened animal to hide, but that still didn't explain how it had gotten into the bookstore in the first place. Lily slowly reached into the small bag Ethan always carried, the one with her snacks and toys. She pulled out a graham cracker, her favorite treat, and held it out toward the cub. The gesture was so simple, so purely kind, that Ethan felt tears prick at his eyes. The cub's nose twitched, catching the scent of the cracker, but it didn't move. Lily waited patiently, her arm extended, the cracker balanced on her tiny palm. Minutes passed, or maybe it was only seconds. Time seemed to stretch and compress in that quiet corner of the bookstore. Then, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, the cub began to uncurl itself. It stretched out one paw, then another, its movements careful and deliberate, as if it too understood the delicacy of this moment. The cub inched forward, its dark eyes never leaving Lily's face. When it was close enough, it gently took the cracker from her hand with its mouth, careful not to touch her skin with its teeth. Lily giggled, a sound like silver bells that seemed to fill the entire bookstore. The cub retreated back to its corner to eat the cracker, but the tension in its body had eased. It no longer looked quite so frightened, quite so lost. Ethan realized he had been holding his breath and let it out slowly. He should be terrified, he knew that. He should be getting his daughter away from a wild animal, calling for help, doing something other than sitting here watching this impossible scene unfold. But there was something about the cub's eyes, something almost human in the way it looked at them, that made him pause. He studied the cub more carefully now, noticing details he had missed in his initial shock. Its fur wasn't just brown, but had subtle patterns in it, swirls and whirls that caught the light in unusual ways. Around its neck, barely visible through the thick fur, was what looked like a collar, but not any collar Ethan had ever seen. It seemed to be made of something that shifted between blue and silver, like moonlight on water. The cub finished the cracker and looked at Lily again, and this time Ethan could swear he saw gratitude in its expression. Lily clapped her hands softly, the way she did when she was happy but trying to be quiet, like when they played games while her mother was sleeping. "Pretty baby," she said, combining two of her favorite words in a way that made perfect sense to her. The cub's ears perked up at the sound of her voice, and it made a soft huffing sound that might have been agreement. Ethan reached out slowly, telegraphed his movements so as not to startle the cub, and gently touched Lily's shoulder. She looked up at him with such joy on her face that he couldn't help but smile back. Whatever was happening here, however impossible it seemed, his daughter was experiencing something magical, and he found he didn't want to be the one to end it. Not yet. The bookstore remained silent around them, as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The green light through the curtain shifted slightly as clouds passed over the sun outside, creating moving patterns on the walls that looked like leaves rustling in a breeze. The cub watched these patterns with interest, its head moving slightly to follow them, and Lily watched the cub with the same fascination. They sat like that for several minutes, a strange triangle of quiet observation, each studying the others with gentle curiosity. Then Ethan heard footsteps approaching from the main part of the bookstore. They were slow, measured steps, accompanied by the soft tap of what sounded like a walking stick. The owner was coming. Ethan's first instinct was to warn him, to call out that there was a situation, but something stopped him. The footsteps didn't quicken, didn't hesitate, just continued their steady approach as if the owner was simply making his regular rounds. The cub's ears swiveled toward the sound, but it didn't seem alarmed. If anything, it seemed to relax even more, settling back into its corner with what looked like relief. A moment later, Michael Hayes appeared at the entrance to the reading nook. Ethan had seen him before, but never really looked at him. He was older than Ethan had first thought, maybe in his 70s, with silver hair that seemed to catch light in the same strange way the cub's collar did. He wore a cardigan that had seen better days and round glasses that made his eyes look larger than they were. Those eyes took in the scene. Lily sitting on the cushions, the bear cub in the corner, Ethan kneeling protectively beside his daughter, and instead of the shock or alarm Ethan expected, Michael smiled. It was a small, knowing smile, the kind you might give when you see an old friend after a long absence. "Ah," Michael said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to fill the space. "I wondered when you might show yourself." He was looking at the cub when he said it, and the cub made that soft huffing sound again, almost like it was responding. Michael moved into the reading nook with surprising grace for someone his age, lowering himself onto one of the cushions with a small grunt of effort. He sat there for a moment, just looking at the cub with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. It wasn't surprise or fear, but something closer to recognition, maybe even affection. "Has she been giving you crackers?" Michael asked, and it took Ethan a moment to realize he was talking to him. "Yes," Ethan managed, his voice coming out rougher than intended. Is it safe? Should I—" He trailed off, not sure what he was asking. Michael's smile widened slightly. "Safe as houses," he said, using an expression Ethan's grandmother used to use. "Safer, maybe. This little one wouldn't hurt a fly. Would you?" The last part was directed at the cub, who tilted its head in what looked remarkably like agreement. Lily had been watching this exchange with interest, and now she scooted closer to Michael, drawn by his gentle voice. "Baby bear," she announced proudly, pointing at the cub. Michael nodded seriously, as if she had shared something very important. Yes, indeed, a very special baby bear. He reached into the pocket of his cardigan and pulled out something Ethan couldn't quite see. It looked like a small, smooth stone, but it caught the light in that same shifting way the cub's collar did. Michael held it out on his palm, not toward the cub, but toward Lily. "Would you like to help?" he asked her. Lily looked at the stone, then at her father. Ethan found himself nodding, though he wasn't sure why. There was something about Michael, something that made him feel like this was all perfectly normal, even though the rational part of his mind knew it was anything but. Lily took the stone carefully in both hands. It was warm. Ethan could see her reaction to it, the way her eyes widened with delight. She held it up to the light, and for a moment, Ethan could swear he saw something moving inside it, like clouds or smoke or maybe stars. "Now then," Michael said, his voice taking on a storytelling quality, "this little one has been waiting for just the right person to find him. Bears, you see, especially bears like this one, they don't get lost by accident. They choose where they want to be found. He was watching Lily as he spoke, and she was listening with the intense concentration she usually reserved for her favorite bedtime stories. "This bookstore has been here for a very long time," Michael continued, "longer than most people realize, and sometimes, just sometimes, it becomes a meeting place for those who need to find each other." The cub had moved slightly closer during Michael's speech, drawn perhaps by his voice or by the stone that Lily was still holding. Its eyes seemed brighter now, more alert, and Ethan noticed that its breathing had steadied. Whatever had been wrong with it, whatever had brought it to hide in this corner of an old bookstore, seemed to be healing just from their presence. Or maybe from Lily's presence specifically. There was something about the way the cub watched her, something that went beyond animal curiosity. It was like recognition, Ethan thought, though that made no sense at all. "The stone," Michael said, gesturing to what Lily was holding, "is very old. Older than this building, older than the city. It's been waiting here in this bookstore for someone like your daughter to come along." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You see, Mr. Marshall, and yes, I know who you are. I've seen you here before. Your daughter has a gift. All children do, really, but most lose it as they grow older. The ability to see with the heart instead of just the eyes, to recognize magic when it's right in front of them instead of explaining it away." Ethan wanted to protest, to say that this was all too strange, too impossible, but the words wouldn't come. Because as he watched his daughter holding that impossible stone, watching that impossible bear cub, he realized that he could feel it too, the magic Michael was talking about. It was like a frequency in the air, a vibration just below the level of normal perception. The bookstore itself seemed to pulse with it, the books on the shelves humming with stories that wanted to be more than just words on a page. Lily stood up, still holding the stone, and took a step toward the cub. The cub didn't retreat this time. Instead, it stretched out its neck, reaching toward her. When they were close enough, Lily gently placed the stone on the ground between them. The moment it touched the floor, something changed. The light in the room seemed to brighten and soften at the same time. The painted forest scenes on the walls appeared to move, the trees swaying in a breeze that existed only in the artwork. And the cub's collar, that strange shifting thing around its neck, began to glow more clearly. "Oh," Ethan breathed, because now he could see it properly. The collar wasn't a collar at all. It was light, pure light, wrapped around the cub's neck like a ribbon of aurora borealis. And in that light, he could see patterns, symbols maybe, or perhaps just the suggestion of symbols, things that meant something important but in a language he didn't know how to read. The cub stood up fully for the first time since they'd discovered it, and Ethan realized it was bigger than he'd thought. Not threatening, but substantial, real in a way that demanded acknowledgement. The cub walked slowly to the stone, sniffed it once, then looked directly at Lily. And then, in a moment that Ethan would remember for the rest of his life, it spoke. Not with words, not with sound, but somehow Ethan heard it anyway, felt it in his chest like an echo of his own heartbeat. "Thank you," it said, or conveyed, or somehow communicated. "I was lost and you found me. I was hungry and you fed me. I was afraid and you showed me kindness." Lily clapped her hands again, delighted but not surprised, as if talking bear cubs were perfectly normal in her world. And maybe they were, Ethan thought. Maybe in her world, magic was still everywhere, in every shadow, in every beam of sunlight, in every story waiting to be told. She reached out and for the first time touched the cub's fur. It was soft, softer than Ethan would have expected, and the cub closed its eyes, leaning into her touch like a cat being petted. "The stone," Michael said quietly, "is a beacon. It calls to those who are lost between worlds, gives them a safe place to rest, to remember who they are." He was looking at the cub as he spoke. "This little one has been traveling for a very long time, haven't you? Through stories and dreams and the spaces between stars. But every traveler needs a rest sometimes, a place to remember what solid ground feels like." The cub opened its eyes and looked at Michael, and there was definitely communication there, something passing between them that Ethan couldn't quite grasp. Michael nodded, as if the cub had asked a question. "Yes," he said, "she's the one we've been waiting for, the one who can help you find your way home." He turned to Ethan. "Your daughter, Mr. Marshall, is what we call a bridge, someone who can stand between worlds without losing herself in either one. It's a rare gift and a precious one." Ethan felt like he should be asking questions, demanding explanations, maybe even grabbing Lily and leaving. But instead, he found himself sitting down on the cushions, accepting this impossible situation with a calm that surprised him. Maybe it was the bookstore itself, the way it seemed to wrap around them like a protective embrace. Or maybe it was the look on Lily's face, the pure joy of a child experiencing something wonderful. Whatever it was, he decided to trust it, to let this strange story unfold however it needed to. The cub had settled down next to Lily now, its head resting on its paws, looking more relaxed than it had since they'd found it. Lily was petting it gently, humming one of her favorite songs, a wordless melody that she'd been humming since she was just a few months old. The stone between them continued to glow softly, pulsing in rhythm with her humming, and Ethan realized that the books around them were responding too. Not obviously, not in any way that could be proven or measured, but he could feel it. The way the stories in them were leaning in, listening, adding their own frequency to whatever was happening here. "Mr. Marshall," Michael said, and his voice was gentle but serious. "What happens next is important. Your daughter has made a connection with this visitor, and that connection needs to be honored. But don't worry," he added, seeing the concern that must have shown on Ethan's face. "It's nothing dangerous, nothing that will hurt her. Think of it more like helping a friend get home after they've been away for a very long time." The cub lifted its head and looked at Ethan directly. And in its dark eyes, he saw something that took his breath away. Stars. Actual stars. Tiny points of light that shouldn't have been there, couldn't have been there, but were. It was like looking through a window into another sky. Another world where bears could be made of starlight and magic was as real as breathing. The cub blinked slowly, and the stars faded, but Ethan knew he hadn't imagined them. "How?" he asked, and he wasn't even sure what he was asking. How was any of this possible? How had they found themselves in this situation? How was his 18-month-old daughter the key to helping a magical bear cub get home? Michael seemed to understand all the questions implicit in that single word. "The how doesn't matter as much as the why," he said. "And the why is simple. Because she can, because she will. Because in all the universe, across all the stories that have ever been told or ever will be told, your daughter and this cub were meant to meet today, in this place, at this moment." Lily had stopped humming and was now looking at the cub with a serious expression, as if they were having a conversation that didn't need words. She nodded once, decisively, then looked at her father. "Help, baby," she said, and it wasn't a question. It was a statement of intent, a declaration of purpose from someone who hadn't yet learned that helping wasn't always possible, that magic wasn't always real. that bears didn't usually appear in bookstores needing assistance getting home. "Yes," Ethan heard himself say, "we'll help the baby." And as soon as he said it, he felt something shift in the room, like a door opening somewhere just out of sight. The cub stood up again, more energetic now, and walked over to one of the bookshelves. It nosed at a particular book, a large, old volume with a deep blue cover that seemed to shimmer like water. Michael stood up, moving with more ease than before, as if the decision to help had somehow made him younger, more vital. "Ah," he said, pulling the book from the shelf. "Of course, I should have known." He brought the book over to where Lily was sitting and placed it carefully on the ground in front of her. The cover, Ethan could see now, was decorated with constellations, silver lines connecting golden stars in patterns he almost recognized. The Big Dipper was there, and Orion, but there were others too, constellations that didn't exist in any astronomy book he'd ever seen. The cub placed a paw on the book, and it fell open to a page near the middle. The page was blank, or no, not blank, but waiting. As they watched, words began to appear, written in a flowing script that seemed to move like water across the paper. But they weren't words in English, or any language Ethan recognized. They were symbols, beautiful and complex, that seemed to tell a story without needing translation. Lily reached out and traced one of the symbols with her finger, and as she did, it began to glow with the same light as the stone. "She's reading it," Michael said softly, wonder in his voice. "She's reading the old language, the first language, the one that was spoken before words were invented." And somehow, Ethan knew he was right. Lily was understanding something in those symbols, something that bypassed normal comprehension and went straight to the heart. Her face was concentrated but peaceful, like when she was listening to a particularly good story. The cub made a sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr, something between the two that seemed to express gratitude and recognition combined. It looked at Lily with such affection that Ethan felt his eyes water again. This impossible creature, this visitor from somewhere else, had found exactly what it needed in his tiny daughter's kindness. And Lily, in turn, seemed to have found something she needed too, though Ethan couldn't quite articulate what that might be. More symbols appeared on the page, flowing like a river of light, and Lily continued to trace them. Each one she touched glowed brighter, and the glow seemed to transfer to the cub's collar of light, making it more substantial, more real. The painted forest on the walls was definitely moving now, the trees swaying in a wind that carried the scent of pine and earth and something else, something like the smell of snow on mountains that existed in another place entirely. "It's a map," Michael said suddenly. "The symbols, they're a map. She's showing him the way home." He looked at Ethan with something like awe. "Do you understand what this means? Your daughter isn't just helping him find his way. She's creating the path. She's writing it into existence through her understanding, her compassion." He shook his head slowly. "I've been the guardian of this bookstore for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like this." Guardian, Ethan thought. Not owner, but guardian. That word choice felt important, felt right. This place was more than just a bookstore. It was a threshold, a place where stories became more than just words on a page. And somehow, his daughter had become part of that magic, had maybe always been part of it, just waiting for the right moment to show itself. The cub walked around the book, studying the symbols from different angles, and then did something that made Ethan's heart skip. It stood up on its hind legs, not threateningly, but formally, like it was about to make an important announcement. And then it bowed, a real, proper bow directed at Lily. She giggled and clapped, then surprised everyone by attempting her own little bow in return, which mostly consisted of bending forward and almost falling over. Michael laughed, a warm, rich sound that seemed to make the books around them rustle with shared amusement. "She accepts your thanks," he told the cub, as if translating, "and she's honored to help." The cub dropped back to all fours and returned to the book, touching its nose to one particular symbol that glowed brighter than all the others. The moment it made contact, the room filled with a sound like wind chimes, but wind chimes made of light, if such a thing were possible. The stone that Lily had placed on the floor earlier began to rise, floating gently upward until it hovered at exactly the height of the cub's collar of light. The two lights, the stone and the collar, began to pulse in synchronization, and Ethan realized they were building to something, some kind of culmination or transformation. He wanted to reach for Lily, to pull her back to safety, but he found he trusted whatever was happening. More than trusted it. He felt honored to witness it. "The stone is a key," Michael explained, though Ethan hadn't asked, "and your daughter is the one who can turn it. Watch." And Ethan did watch as Lily reached up and gently grasped the floating stone. The moment her fingers closed around it, the bookstore filled with light. Not harsh light, not blinding, but warm and golden like summer sunshine through honey. The cub's form began to shimmer, becoming less solid, more ethereal, but somehow also more real, more true to what it actually was. Through the light, Ethan could see the cub's true nature. It wasn't just a bear, it was a constellation given form, a piece of the night sky that had somehow gotten lost and ended up in their world. Its fur was made of midnight blue space, with stars scattered across it like diamonds. Its eyes were nebulae, swirling with colors that didn't have names, and its collar of light was actually a tail of cosmic dust, the kind that follows comets as they journey through the void. "Oh my," Michael breathed, "a star bear. I'd heard stories, but I never thought. They're guardians of dreams, you know. They help children's wishes travel from Earth to the stars." He looked at Lily with new understanding. That's why it came to her. She must have made a wish, a powerful one, and it got lost trying to deliver it. Lily was smiling up at the transformed cub, not at all frightened by its cosmic appearance. She held up the stone, which was now glowing like a tiny sun in her hands. "Home," she said clearly, and the word seemed to resonate through the air like a bell. The cub made that huffing sound again, but now it sounded like solar wind, like the music of the spheres that ancient philosophers used to talk about. The book on the floor began to glow too, its pages turning by themselves until it reached a page that showed a perfect illustration of the night sky. But this wasn't just any night sky. This was the sky as it looked from somewhere else, somewhere where Earth was just another star among billions. The cub looked at the illustration, then at Lily, then back at the illustration. It was clearly a question, maybe the most important question it had ever asked. "Yes," Lily said, though Ethan didn't know how she understood what was being asked. "Go home, come back, promise." The last word was said with the seriousness that only very young children can manage, the kind of promise that transcends logic and exists purely in the realm of the heart. The cub moved closer to her, and for a moment Ethan thought it was going to nuzzle her like a regular bear might. But instead, it breathed on her, a breath that sparkled with stardust, that smelled like ozone and dreams and the first snow of winter. Where the breath touched Lily's skin, tiny points of light appeared, like freckles made of stars. They glowed for a moment, then faded, but Ethan knew they were still there, just below the surface, a gift from one friend to another. Lily laughed, delighted, and hugged the cub around its neck. For a moment, Child and Star Bear were one creature, connected by something stronger than physics, older than time. When she let go, the cub stepped back and stood in the center of the glowing page. The illustration began to rise from the paper, becoming three-dimensional, becoming real. It was a doorway, Ethan realized, a doorway made of starlight and story, leading back to wherever the cub truly belonged. The cub looked back at them one more time, and in its nebula eyes Ethan saw gratitude, love, and a promise. It would remember them. It would remember Lily's kindness, her innocence, her willingness to help without question or condition. "Thank you," Michael said to the cub, "for reminding us that magic is real, that kindness matters, that sometimes the impossible is just another word for miraculous." The cub dipped its head in acknowledgement, then stepped through the doorway. For a moment, its form was visible on the other side, running across a field of stars, leaping from constellation to constellation with joy. Then the doorway began to shrink, the illustration settling back onto the page, becoming flat and still once more. But just before it closed completely, something came through from the other side. A single feather, but not from any earthly bird. It was made of condensed starlight, solid but somehow still glowing, still alive with cosmic energy. It floated down gently and landed in Lily's outstretched hand. She looked at it with wonder, then showed it to her father with pride. "Present," she announced, and Ethan couldn't help but laugh. The bookstore settled back to normal around them, or as normal as it ever was. The painted forest on the walls was still, once more, the books had stopped their subtle humming, and the light through the green curtain was just regular afternoon sunlight. But something had changed. The air felt different, charged with possibility, with the knowledge that the world was bigger and stranger and more wonderful than most people ever realized. Michael stood up slowly, his movements showing his age once more, but his eyes were bright with satisfaction. "Well," he said, "that was something special. Something very special indeed." He looked at Lily, who was still examining her feather with intense concentration. "Your daughter has a gift, Mr. Marshall, a rare and precious gift. She sees the world as it really is, not just as we've been taught to believe it is." Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He was still processing what had just happened, trying to fit it into his understanding of reality and finding that his understanding needed to expand to accommodate it. The rational part of his mind was trying to explain it away, to find logical reasons for what they'd witnessed, but his heart knew better. His heart knew that they had just been part of something magical, something that would change them both forever. "Will it come back?" he finally asked, and Michael smiled. "Perhaps," he said. "Star bears have long memories and longer journeys, but even if that particular one doesn't return, others will come. This bookstore, you see, is a way station for travelers between worlds, and now that your daughter has shown she can help them, well, word travels fast in those circles." He winked at Lily. "You might want to keep some extra crackers handy." Lily had tucked the feather carefully into her pocket and was now looking at the Book of Constellations, which had returned to being just a normal book. Or maybe not quite normal. When she touched it, the pages seemed to shimmer slightly, as if remembering what they had just been part of. She looked up at Michael with a question in her eyes, and he understood immediately. "Yes, you can borrow it," he said. "In fact, I think it belongs with you now. Some books choose their readers, and this one has clearly chosen you." Ethan picked up the book, surprised by how light it felt, as if it were made of dreams rather than paper and binding. The cover was warm to the touch, and he could swear he felt a pulse, like a heartbeat, like something alive and waiting. He looked at the title for the first time and saw that it was written in letters that seemed to shift and change, sometimes reading Maps of the Night Sky, sometimes Paths Between Worlds, and sometimes just Home. "Thank you," he said to Michael, and he meant it for more than just the book. Thank you for not calling them crazy, for not trying to rationalize away the magic, for being a guardian of wonders in a world that often forgot they existed. Michael seemed to understand all of this. He nodded gravely, then surprised Ethan by bowing slightly to Lily, the same formal bow the Star Bear had given her. "Thank you, young bridge builder," he said to her, "for reminding an old man that magic isn't something we grow out of. It's something we grow into if we're brave enough to keep our hearts open." Lily giggled and attempted another bow in return, this time managing to stay upright. Then she toddled over to her stroller and climbed in, clearly ready for whatever adventure came next. As Ethan pushed the stroller back through the bookstore, he noticed things he hadn't seen on the way in. Books that seemed to glow slightly on their shelves, shadows that moved independently of the light that should have been casting them, and a cat sleeping in a sunbeam that looked suspiciously like it had wings folded against its sides. The bookstore was showing him its true face now, trusting him with its secrets. They paused at the door, and Ethan looked back at Michael, who had returned to his place behind the counter. "Same time next week?" Michael asked, and there was something hopeful in his voice. Ethan nodded. "Same time next week," he confirmed, "and I'll bring extra crackers." Michael's laughter followed them out onto the street, warm and welcoming, a promise that the door to magic would always be open for them. The city street seemed different too, though Ethan couldn't quite say how. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold, and the shadows seemed softer, more forgiving. Lily was humming again, that same wordless melody, and Ethan realized that the feather in her pocket was glowing faintly in response. They were connected now, he and his daughter, to something larger than themselves, to a network of magic that existed alongside the everyday world, invisible to most but real to those who knew how to look. As they walked home, Ethan thought about the Star Bear, probably back in its own realm by now, delivering the wishes of children to the stars. He thought about Michael, guardian of a bookstore that was so much more than it appeared. And he thought about Lily, his precious daughter, who had shown him that the world was full of wonders if you just knew how to see them. She had fed a hungry creature without hesitation, had helped a lost soul find its way home, had built a bridge between worlds with nothing but kindness and an open heart. The feather in her pocket continued to glow softly, a reminder that what they had experienced was real, that magic wasn't just in stories, but in the world around them, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to believe. And as they turned the corner toward home, Ethan could have sworn he saw a shooting star streak across the daylight sky, impossibly bright, impossibly beautiful, a greeting from a friend who had found its way home. That night, as Ethan tucked Lily into bed, she pulled out the feather and held it up to the nightlight. It cast patterns on the ceiling that looked like constellations, some familiar, some strange and new. "Baby bear," she said sleepily, and Ethan kissed her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart." The baby bear went home. She smiled and closed her eyes, the feather still clutched in her small hand, glowing softly like a nightlight made of stars. Ethan sat by her bed for a long time, watching her sleep, thinking about the day's impossible events. He thought about calling his wife, telling her what had happened, but how could he explain it? How could he make her understand that their daughter had helped a lost constellation find its way back to the sky, that she had a gift for bridging worlds, that magic was real and living in a bookstore just a few blocks away? He decided to wait, to let the experience settle, to find the right words if they existed. The Book of Constellations sat on Lily's shelf, looking perfectly ordinary except for the way it seemed to pulse gently in the darkness, like it was breathing. Ethan reached out and touched it, and for a moment he could feel it all again, the magic, the wonder, the connection to something vast and beautiful. The book was a door, he realized, or maybe a window, a way of seeing the world as it really was, full of mystery and possibility. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself noticing things he'd never seen before. The way birds sometimes flew in patterns that looked like letters. The way puddles after rain reflected not just the sky, but sometimes other skies, other worlds. The way Lily would sometimes stop and stare at empty air, smiling and waving at things only she could see. He didn't try to explain these things, didn't try to rationalize them. He just accepted them as part of the new reality they had discovered. A reality where magic was as common as breathing if you knew how to perceive it. When they returned to the bookstore the following week, Michael greeted them like old friends. The reading nook had been rearranged slightly, made even cozier with new cushions and a small table that held a plate of crackers and a glass of water. "Just in case," Michael said with a wink. Lily immediately went to the corner where they had found the star bear, running her hands along the wall as if checking for something. "She's looking for the door," Michael observed. "She knows it's still there, just hidden. Children always know where the doors are. It's only as we get older that we forget how to see them." He pulled a different book from the shelf, this one bound in green leather with silver clasps. "This one might interest you," he said, handing it to Ethan. "It's about bridges, the kind your daughter builds, about the people throughout history who have stood between worlds and helped travelers find their way." Ethan opened the book carefully and gasped. There, on the first page, was a drawing that looked exactly like Lily, though the clothes were different, older, from another time perhaps. The child in the drawing was holding out food to a creature that was half light, half shadow, and around them swirled patterns that looked like the symbols they had seen in the constellation book. "That's not," he started, but Michael shook his head. "Not your Lily, no, but another bridge builder from long ago. They appear in every generation. These special souls who can see beyond the veil, who can offer kindness to creatures from other realms. Your daughter is part of a long tradition, Mr. Marshall. A noble tradition." He gestured to the book. "Keep it. Read it. It will help you understand what's ahead, how to support her gift as she grows." As Ethan read while Lily played in the reading nook, occasionally sharing her crackers with invisible friends, he learned about the history of the bridge builders. They had many names across different cultures: the Welcomers, the Star Whisperers, the Dream Shepherds. They were the ones who helped lost spirits find their way, who could see the magic that existed alongside the mundane world, who kept the doors between worlds from closing completely. And they all shared certain traits: unusual empathy, the ability to see patterns others missed, and most importantly, the willingness to help without question or condition. The book was full of stories, some that sounded like fairy tales, others that read like historical accounts. There was the boy in medieval England who helped a dragon made of mist find its way back to the cloud realm. The woman in Japan who guided fox spirits through the modern city back to their forest homes. The old man in Peru who taught star llamas, cousins to the star bears, how to navigate the new constellations created by satellite lights. Each story was different, but the theme was the same: kindness transcending the boundaries between worlds. As the afternoon wore on, other people came into the bookstore, regular customers who nodded to Michael and browsed the shelves. But Ethan noticed that some of them paused near the reading nook, watching Lily with knowing smiles. When one elderly woman walked by, she dropped something near Lily's feet, a small blue marble that gleamed with inner light. Lily picked it up, examined it carefully, then looked up at the woman and said, "Thank you." The woman winked and continued on her way. "Others know," Michael explained quietly. "Others who have seen, who have helped, who remember that the world is bigger than most people believe. Your daughter draws them, like a lighthouse draws ships. They recognize her for what she is." He smiled. This bookstore has always been a gathering place for such people, a safe harbor in a world that often forgets its own magic. As they prepared to leave, Lily carefully gathered her treasures, the feather, the marble, and a small silver leaf that had appeared from nowhere while she was playing. She put them all in a little pouch that Michael gave her, one that seemed to be made of fabric that shifted between blue and purple like twilight. "For your collection," he said. "Bridge builders always collect tokens from their friends. Helps them remember that it all really happened." Walking home, Ethan felt different, more aware, more present. The world hadn't changed, he realized. His perception of it had. Or maybe Lily had given him permission to see what had always been there, hidden in plain sight. Every shadow could be a doorway. Every reflection could show another world. Every kind act could be the key that helped someone find their way home. It was overwhelming and wonderful and slightly terrifying all at once. That evening, as his wife came home from work, Ethan tried to find the words to explain their day. But Lily beat him to it, running to her mother with the constellation book and the pouch of treasures. "Mama, baby bear," she announced, opening the book to the page where the door had appeared. And to Ethan's amazement, the page shimmered, showing for just a moment the star bear running across its cosmic field, safe and happy and home. His wife looked at the page, then at Lily, then at Ethan. "Did you have an adventure today?" she asked, and there was something in her voice that made Ethan wonder if she knew more than she let on. Lily nodded enthusiastically and began babbling about the bear and the crackers and the nice man with the books. His wife listened seriously, asking questions, treating the story with the respect it deserved. Later, after Lily was asleep, his wife found Ethan in the living room, reading the book about bridge builders. She sat down next to him and was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My grandmother used to tell me stories about seeing things others couldn't see, about helping creatures that didn't quite belong in our world. I always thought they were just stories." She paused. "But sometimes, when Lily looks at something I can't see and smiles, I wonder." Ethan showed her the feather, still glowing faintly in the darkness. She took it carefully, running her fingers along its edge of condensed starlight. "It's real," she whispered, and it wasn't a question. "It's all real." Ethan nodded, and she leaned against him, both of them looking at this impossible artifact from another world that their daughter had earned through simple kindness. "What do we do now?" she asked. "How do we raise a child who can do these things, see these things?" Ethan thought about Michael's words, about the book of bridge builders, about the legacy Lily had inherited or perhaps chosen. "We support her," he said. "We believe her. We keep her safe but don't clip her wings. And we remember that magic isn't something to be afraid of. It's something to be grateful for." They sat together in the soft darkness, the feather glowing between them, thinking about their remarkable daughter and the world she could touch. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime sounds, but now they knew that within that ordinary noise was extraordinary magic, waiting for those with eyes to see and hearts open enough to help. And upstairs, Lily slept peacefully, dreaming perhaps of star bears and doorways made of light, her small hand still clutching the pouch of treasures that proved it had all been wonderfully, impossibly real. The weeks that followed brought subtle changes to their lives. Lily would sometimes stop during their walks and point at empty air, saying, "Friend," and Ethan learned to wait patiently while she had conversations with beings only she could see. The constellation book revealed new pages whenever they opened it, showing different skies, different worlds, different possibilities, and the bookstore became their second home, a place where magic was normal and kindness was the most powerful force in any universe. Michael taught them things, small things at first. How to recognize when a creature from another realm was near, they left subtle signs, like flowers blooming out of season or shadows that fell the wrong way. How to tell if someone needed help finding their way, they often appeared at boundaries. Doorways, crossroads, places where one thing became another, and most importantly, how to offer help without forcing it, because beings from other worlds, like beings from this one, needed to choose their own paths. One afternoon, about a month after the Star Bear incident, they arrived at the bookstore to find Michael talking to a young woman who looked distressed. She was holding a cat, but as they got closer, Ethan realized it wasn't quite a cat. Its fur seemed to be made of autumn leaves, constantly shifting between gold and red and brown, and its eyes were the deep green of forest pools. The woman was saying something about finding it in her garden, about how it wouldn't eat, about how it seemed to be fading. Without hesitation, Lily toddled over and held out her arms. The leaf cat, for lack of a better term, immediately perked up, its ears swiveling toward her. The woman, looking surprised but desperate, carefully handed the creature to Lily. The moment it was in her arms, the leaf cat began to purr, a sound like wind through trees, and its colors became brighter, more vibrant. Lily carried it to the reading nook, talking to it in her babbling way, and the cat responded with small chirps and trills that sounded like birdsong. "Another one who got lost," Michael said quietly to Ethan. "They're drawn to gardens, these ones, but sometimes they can't find their way back to the eternal autumn they come from." He pulled out another book, and this one bound in bark with leaves pressed into the cover. "Your daughter continues to amaze. Most bridge builders specialize in one type of traveler, but she seems to welcome them all." The woman who had brought the leaf cat watched in wonder as Lily played with it, offering it not food, but fallen leaves she pulled from her pocket, leaves she had collected on their walk to the bookstore. The cat ate them delicately, each one restoring a bit more of its vitality. "How did she know?" the woman asked. "How did she know what it needed?" Ethan could only shrug. "She just does," he said, and realized that was enough of an explanation. As they had with the Star Bear, they watched Lily work her gentle magic. She found the right page in the bark-covered book, traced the symbols that appeared there, and opened another door. This one led to a forest that existed in eternal autumn, where the trees were always gold and the ground was always carpeted with perfectly crisp leaves. The leaf cat looked through the door, then back at Lily, clearly torn. She kissed its head gently and said, "Go home. Visit soon." The cat rubbed against her one more time, leaving a small collar of woven leaves around her wrist, then leaped through the door into its autumn world. The woman who had brought it cried a little, but they were tears of relief and joy. "I knew it wasn't just a cat," she said. "I knew it needed something I couldn't give it. Thank you." She looked at Lily with something approaching awe. "Thank you so much." After she left, Michael showed them a ledger he kept, a record of all the travelers who had passed through the bookstore over the years. There were hundreds of entries, each one a story of something lost finding its way home. "Your daughter's name will be in here many times before she's done," he said. "Already. Word is spreading in the other realms. There's a new bridge builder, a young one with a pure heart and endless kindness." As autumn turned to winter, their visits to the bookstore became a regular rhythm in their lives. Each week brought new adventures, new creatures seeking help, new doors to be opened. There was the snow sprite who had gotten trapped in a snow globe, the midnight butterfly whose wings were made of dreams, the echo mouse who existed 2 seconds in the past and needed help catching up to the present. Each one found what they needed in Lily's simple, direct kindness. But it wasn't just about helping others. Lily was learning too, growing in ways that had nothing to do with normal childhood development. She was learning the languages of different worlds, not with words, but with understanding. She was learning that kindness was not a finite resource, but something that grew the more you gave it away. And she was learning that being different, seeing things others couldn't see, wasn't something to hide, but something to celebrate. Ethan and his wife learned too. They learned to see the magic their daughter showed them, to trust in the impossible, to open their hearts to wonders they had been taught didn't exist. They learned that their role was not to protect Lily from her gift, but to protect her gift from a world that might not understand it. And they learned that love could transcend dimensions, that family could include beings made of starlight and leaves and dreams. One snowy evening, as they were preparing to leave the bookstore, Lily suddenly stopped and looked up at the ceiling. She pointed and said one word, "Friend." They all looked up, and there, impossibly, was the Star Bear. Not fully materialized, more like a projection made of snow and light, but definitely their Star Bear. It was running across the ceiling, which had become a field of stars, leaping from constellation to constellation, just as they had seen it do when it went home. It paused directly above Lily and seemed to look down at her. A single snowflake fell from it, but this was no ordinary snowflake. It was perfect, crystalline, and it glowed with the same inner light as the feather. It landed on Lily's outstretched hand and didn't melt, instead transforming into a tiny crystal star that she added to her growing collection of treasures. The Star Bear continued its journey across the ceiling and disappeared, but its joy lingered in the air like the echo of laughter. "It remembered," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "Across all that distance, through all those worlds, it remembered a little girl who showed it kindness when it was lost and afraid." He looked at Lily with deep respect. "That's the real magic, you know. Not the doors or the traveling between worlds, but the connections we make, the kindness we show, the love we share. That's what holds all the universes together." As winter deepened, the bookstore became a beacon for lost things. Word had indeed spread through the other realms that there was a place of safety, a child who could help, a door that was always open to those who needed it. Some days they would arrive to find creatures already waiting, drawn by instinct or perhaps by the network of impossible communication that seemed to exist between worlds. And Lily greeted each one with the same open-hearted joy, the same willingness to help. Her vocabulary was growing too, though not always with words that existed in any earthly language. She would sometimes speak in sounds that made no sense to adult ears, but that the visiting creatures understood perfectly. She was becoming multilingual in the truest sense, speaking not just different languages, but the languages of different realities. And somehow, yet this didn't interfere with her normal development. If anything, she seemed more advanced than other children her age, as if exposure to multiple worlds had accelerated her understanding of this one. The collection of books in their home grew as well. Michael would send them home with volumes that appeared on the shelves specifically for them, books that taught them about the history and nature of the bridges between worlds. They learned that these connections had always existed, but that they were fragile, maintained only by the belief and kindness of a few special individuals in each generation. They learned that every act of helping a traveler strengthened these bridges, made it easier for magic to exist alongside the mundane. One day, Ethan asked Michael how he had become the guardian of the bookstore. Michael was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I was like Lily once. I could see things others couldn't. But as I grew older, the seeing faded. I could no longer open the doors myself, but I could still sense them, still feel when travelers were near. So I became a guardian instead of a bridge builder, keeping this place safe for those who still had the gift." He looked at Lily, who was carefully arranging her treasures on the small table in the reading nook, each one glowing softly with its own inner light. "She won't lose it, though, I can tell. Some bridge builders keep their gift their whole lives. They're the special ones, the ones who remind the rest of us that magic never really goes away. It just waits for us to remember how to see it." As spring arrived, bringing new life to the city, it also brought a special visitor to the bookstore. Ethan and Lily arrived for their weekly visit to find a woman waiting for them. But this was no ordinary woman. She seemed to be made of flower petals and morning dew, constantly shifting between solid and ethereal. She was old, ancient even, but beautiful in the way that ancient trees are beautiful, with a presence that spoke of deep roots and countless seasons. "I am the Spring Queen from the garden between worlds," she said, her voice like wind chimes and bird song. "I have come to thank the young bridge builder." She knelt before Lily, who watched her with curious eyes but no fear. "You have helped so many find their way home. My subjects speak of your kindness, your pure heart. I bring you a gift." She held out her hand, and in it was a seed, but not just any seed. This one pulsed with life, with potential, with magic. "Plant this," she said, "and it will grow into a tree that exists in both worlds, a living bridge that will make your work easier. As long as it grows, the door between worlds will never fully close." She placed the seed in Lily's small hand, and it immediately began to glow, responding to her touch. They planted the seed in a pot in the bookstore, right in the reading nook where it all began. Michael said it was fitting that the bookstore should have a tree that existed between worlds, and the seed grew fast, impossibly fast, becoming a sapling within days. Its leaves were silver on one side and gold on the other, and when the wind moved through them, they made music that sounded like distant stars singing. The tree became a gathering place for the travelers. They would rest in its shade, which somehow existed even inside the bookstore, defying all laws of light and shadow. And Lily would sit beneath it, listening to stories from other worlds, learning songs that had never been sung on Earth, making friends with beings that most people would never believe existed.